Welcome to the Town to Learn Show podcast series, episode 64 with independent learning tech analyst John Lay. Today I interview Lefteris Ntouanoglou, CEO and president of Schoox, about their current state of learning and learning technology in the unique vertical of franchise education. You can find more of our fiercely independent content at towntolearning.com. Well, welcome back, listeners, and thank you very much for tuning in to another episode. On this show, I am fortunate to interview the world's leading experts in extended enterprise learning technology from both the vendor and the practitioner perspectives. And today is no different, as we have the CEO and president of Schoox here to give us a much needed update on the challenges, solutions, expectations within the unique vertical of franchise education. Now, those of you that follow Talented Learning religiously know that we talk a lot about channel and partner education as a component of extended enterprise, and franchise education kind of falls under that umbrella for sure, but it has unique use cases, unique challenges and requirements compared to the other sectors, different type of learners, different connectivity problems, and lack of time, like all problems. And so those are all things that are unique to franchise education, and Lefteris and Schoox has been historically solving those problems and continuing to innovate in this particular vertical, among many, but in this particular vertical. And so we wanted to have Lefteris come on and give us all an update and teach us what we need to know about the 2023 state of franchise education and learning technology in general. So Lefteris, thanks so much for coming on the show. It's great to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you, John, and it's always a pleasure, and thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I think we're going to get more out of it. We're going to get a lot out of this because, I was looking back in my notes, and the last time I was really focusing on the franchise vertical was almost back in 2017 or 18. So for all of us, we need a much needed update. But Schoox may not be a household name to a lot of listeners here. So why don't we start at the top and tell us about your organization, who you are, a little bit about you, what role you play in the marketplace, who are your ideal clients, type of thing, and just clue us in at the top here.
Sure. So Schoox is a learning and talent development platform. We're a single product company. We started about 10 years ago, and we really started from the restaurant industry, and through that restaurant industry, we expanded to other similar industries. Even though our product is a very solid and is covering L&D in a holistic way, and it can serve many and most industries, I would say, and organizations, of different types and different sizes. But where we're really strong are with what we call multi-unit or franchise organizations that have very unique characteristics. And then, of course, also any organizations that have frontline workers that are very often operating in a very similar way as well, and have similar unique pain points to address. And so the differentiator of our product, definitely one differentiator is that over the course of all of those years, we became experts and became also domain experts. So we know very well what those pain points are, and we're able to, through our customers, to learn how to address those pain points and build a product that's really almost tailored for those type of organizations. So if we go a little bit into more details, one of the problems, they have many different unique pain points, but one of the problems those organizations really have is that those are fairly complicated organizations in terms of how they are structured and organized. They are very different than a more typical enterprise organization, I would say. So there's a corporate part of the world that's operating in a very similar way than a typical enterprise organization. But then they have a whole ecosystem where they may have corporate-owned stores, and they may have franchise-owned stores. And in the franchise part of the organization, it may be complex as well, because there might be different ownerships. So franchisees may own multiple stores, and they may own stores alongside and together with other franchisees. And sometimes they may be part of entities who own stores. And then we may have also employees who work at different stores, and those stores may be owned by different franchisees. And then this is a fairly complex ecosystem. It's not just a simple organization. And of course, the problem is that the LMS is one of the very, very few enterprise applications, I feel, where the org structure of an organization has really be reflected in the system. Because this is not the case in any other system. In any other system, it's just kind of the one-to-one report, meaning John reports to Bob, Bob to Jake, and so on, as it is in case for in all other enterprise applications. But in our world, we really have to kind of build the whole structure. And the reason is because those organizations very often operate also in a very decentralized way, which means the franchisees are really the boss of their own part of the organization. Those are sub-organizations, actually. So we have a lot of admins in a way in a system, not just one. And depending on how that organization wants to operate, very often the franchisees or the operators may be given a lot of freedom to do also their own training activities tailored to their needs, depending on where they are located and so on. And so there's sometimes just overlapping. And this is something that we were able to address very in a very efficient way. And we are the only LMS that can really deal with those complex org structures. And we've seen many, many systems where, even in a very simple pain point where an employee may work at 2 different or 3 different stores. That's really the case very often. That may belong to different franchisees. They may need multiple accounts. And so there's no one profile of that user with all of the training coming from different kind of sources. So that's, I would say, one of our strong differentiators. And of course, the other one is that it has a very different population, John. So usually younger people, and those people used to live on their, they're living on the devices, on the mobile devices. So training has to be definitely mobile and be delivered very quickly.
Okay. And so organizations are a complexity or a challenge for franchise organizations, as well as the younger demographics of the learners. Anything else from their perspective or from your perspective that's a key challenge faced by these organizations that maybe is not normal in other verticals or
Yeah. They have several, uniqueness. First of all, they have a very high turnover. I mean, a turnover that is anywhere between 100 and 200% is very common. And of course, as you can imagine, that is imposing a very different need for, operation. People come and go all the time. So on average, an employee may stay 4 to 6 months. It's a very short period of time. And so it's hard to find people. And then once you find those people, you have to really very quickly get them up to speed. So there's no luxury to have a long learning curve. So they have to be kind of productive almost the next day. And there's also a lot of on-the-job training for those people as well. And then, as you know, in many situations, those stores have high traffic. And so those employees don't really have a lot of time taking and spending, on the training. It's not like a white collar job where you may spend half an hour at some point at your desk and taking your training. That's not the case. And so training has to be delivered, differently. And so this is one of the challenges they definitely have. I would say it's the most important one. The other one is that some of those industries, like the restaurant industry, they really operate on a very tight margin. So every dollar really counts. And so any solution or anything, for example, the training is usually the obligation of the franchisor. And so, of course, they try really to get the most out of every dollar for the franchisees, which is important as well. So everything they use, it has to be effective. It has to really help productivity. It make their life much easier.
Do franchisees have the same challenges and requirements as franchisors? Are they on the same page all the time, or is there, I don't know, friction between what franchisees want and what they get? What has been your experience on that?
I think there's always a healthy amount of friction, between what they get and what they would like. But overall, I think usually they're pretty aligned. And then it depends again on the specific brand. There are brands that are really very, very, very large, and it makes things much more difficult. And then the brands that are not as large, and so it depends also on the type of organization and the brand itself. But usually they are aligned. Now, often they may have additional needs for additional training depending on how they'd like to get things done and train their people. And so we have customers that operate in a more decentralized way than some others. We have large organizations where all the training is delivered only out of the corporate part of the organization. It's for consistency purposes, it's all the same. And then we have equally large organizations or small organizations where the training that's delivered by the corporate part of the organization is part of the training, and then every franchisee has the freedom to put online their own training, where the corporate part of organization may not be even aware of what they train their people. Of course, from a product perspective, that comes with a much higher level of complexity, as you can imagine, because now all of a sudden, the corporate part, shouldn't see, all the reporting data, because part of it is just, delivered by the franchisee. Or if an hourly worker is working at two different stores that are owned by two different franchisees, and they deliver different training, every one of those in the corporate training, every one of those stakeholders in the reporting should see a different part of that employee, if it makes sense. Another very typical situation.
Wow. And how does all this translate, the high turnover, the lack of time? You mentioned OJT, but how's all this translate into the modern state of content? If they don't have a lot of time, what's content look like? Is it on the go? Is it more mentoring and coaching? Is it informal, formal, off the shelf? Tell us what the mix looks like nowadays. Virtual.
It's everything. It's everything. It's a good amount of on the job training for sure. And yeah, it's a lot of on the job training. Then there's a lot of informal training as well. And then there's some training that's off the shelf, especially if it's food safety, alcohol serving, which is kind of mandated and they're obligated. And so it has to be even state certified, for example. And so they have to get that training from outside. The rest of the training is usually built in-house. I would say that compared to more standard enterprise organizations, off-the-shelf content is less, because it's kind of based on what compliance purposes and what compliance requirements there are. But then there's informal training as well. Yeah, they don't have that much in-class training, I would say, at least not for the employees, the hourly workers. They may have instructor-led training, I would say, if they have for other types of employees or stakeholders of the ecosystem, franchisees, development agents, for example, locally at that kind of people.
You mentioned earlier that mobile was important because of the age group. How does mobile play into it? Is it mobile apps? Is it mobile responsive? Is it mobile while they're working in between customers? Like what's it look like?
Yeah, for example, for us, even though our application is responsive, but for us it was always being native, because on a mobile device, a really heavy mobile device user expects a native app, because the whole user experience is very different than a web application. And if you squeeze a web application that is responsive on a small handheld device screen, it's not looking very good. And I think that's not the purpose of being responsive. Responsiveness is something that a website can be responsive, but an application, it's being responsive. I wasn't a big fan of it, even though it depends how our customers want to use Schoox, for example. But it should be native, so that it can really be very easy to use and as expected from the mobile user.
Yeah, for sure. How important is it now in 2023 to prove that you know something versus just take a test and say that you know it? Is there, you mentioned OJT activities earlier. Are they automated in the LMS? Is that becoming more prevalent where somebody has to actually perform the steps and have somebody
Yes,
to
yes,
see that? You're seeing a lot of that?
yes, yes. In our industries, that's kind of, I don't know if it's a prevailed part of training, but it's definitely a much bigger part than in any other part of the market, and especially because you can teach someone how to create a sandwich, and there's some French organizations that have thousands of combination of sandwiches. Okay, and there's some other things as well, but in reality, you want to see the employee really creating that and preparing that sandwich, for example. And there are other things as well. There are a ton of tasks that they have to kind of learn, and there's a more practical stuff. And so in all of those practical topics that they have to familiarize themselves, OJT is just the most efficient way of acquiring the knowledge you need.
How about from a integration or a technical standpoint? What are any considerations that you see from, I don't know, multi single sign on, or I don't know, multi, if you have franchises and those franchises sometimes have other franchises, there's probably a lot of data feed issues. What do you see there? What's unique? It makes you chuckle. That's probably an understatement. Some issues.
Yeah, it can
What's
sometimes
unique
be a
there? What do we
monster.
know?
It can be a monster of a challenge sometimes. So it's another unique pain point that those organizations have. It's just not from a feature perspective and how your product, what your product should support, is from a technology perspective. First of all, integrations is always, a must. And as technology is evolving and more tools come out, from employees engagement tools and other interesting tools, of course, the ecosystem becomes larger and we have all to integrate with each other more intense than in the past. But those franchise organizations, very often they don't have a single source of truth for the entire population. Some organizations have built a unified database where they have all the employees, but because they don't own the franchise stores, for example, it's a different effort. So they may go through a challenge because they may do it through POI systems, which we know all that this can be a lot of challenges, a unique ID, and a lot of challenges that come with that type of integration, kind of bringing together all the data set for all employees. And so sometimes we integrate with that unified data set that the organization has created and maintains, of course, on a daily basis. Or we may integrate with another tool that they use that has done the work, like we have, let's say, integrations with scheduling software applications, which are used very often by those franchise organizations, a very important task of their everyday operational activities. And so we may integrate with that application as well. So it depends. And sometimes it's a fairly fragmented situation where we may even have to build separate integrations for user provisioning with larger franchisees who may have their own system because they may own 200 stores within a specific brand, and so they build their own set of applications. So it's a large variety, and single sign-on is insanely important as well, because you can really expect employees that have a high turnover of even up to 200%. Okay, and they don't have corporate emails. And so you can really have even an easy password recovery than you may have in other situations. And so they may not even provide the phone numbers, for example, for that purpose. So everything is, from that perspective, much more complex. And they have other restrictions, by the way, as well. And so sometimes they need to control the location at which the employees take the training. So they may want them to take the training only while they're at the store, and not, outside of the store, or outside of their working schedule, for example, for obvious reasons. Or they may want to allow them, but they need to know exactly how much of a training they took, within the working hours, and how much of the training they took outside of the working hours, because they may want to compensate them for that training. And so this is some of the complexities we have to deal with to provide, the right data to them and the right reports.
Wow. Wow. Amazing. What about from an AI perspective? You talked real quickly about content authoring as perhaps being one application. It's hard to swing a stick, in the learning systems industry in 2023 and not hit a topic of AI. So, is there
Yeah.
other areas of your application where that's becoming important right now? Do you think it's hype? What are your thoughts on that and the Schoox platform and franchises in general with AI? What's your theory?
I mean, AI is out there for quite some time now, and it became a hype for, a few years ago. I think now it has become more mature. Definitely AI is more advanced, in some other businesses, in some other parts of the technology, and less in some others. I mean, from a product maturity perspective. So in learning and development, we've been tracking for the last years to see exactly how AI is progressing and how mature it is. We didn't really want to rush because that's a pretty serious kind of addition in the system. And it's one of the things that has to function flawless. You can put in an AI engine and pull the trigger and have it act in an autonomous way and not being sure how that machine is going to kind of function and what's going to produce. It just as a simple example, our system was from day one very social, insanely social. And so customers loved it, but everybody was gun shy. And we have customers that bought the system because it was very social, but they started using it very lightly, the social aspect of the product, 5-6 years later. One of the problems is social means that you have more people kind of being active in the system and even creating comments, posts, content, etc. And there's a problem. Okay, how do we control what's going to be put into the wall and whatever? So can we control the posts before they go live? So if you have concerns for that, imagine now with AI, which can be a complete black box sometimes, no matter how good it is, because AI can be as stupid as a brain of a little child, or as smart as a Nobel Prize winner. So it depends on what data you feed that AI engine and where it gets the data. So it needs a lot of training, and so we've been tracking for some time to see the progress of AI. We believe that AI has crossed a certain threshold of maturity. We feel that it's now worth really start putting AI into our product. And yeah, I would say the different buckets or different parts of the product where AI can make a difference. For us and for myself, honestly, the most important one is being a connector between learning and development. I mean, AI it can create content. We can talk about this as well. But I feel that learning and development has always been disconnected out there for some reason. And so we train people, but we don't really correlate that training to the development and the progress of the people, being able to measure and track and see if we're even doing it right, if we really help people developing their skills and progressing and improving. And of course, that's kind of one connection. Then if you really, let's say you've experienced your employees making progress on their skills and on development through training, then does it really make a difference on the business outcome? Okay, imagine everybody on paper, completing training great, and as you said, through exams and they get everything right, and their skill strength seems high on all assessments, but they don't really deliver, or it doesn't make a difference in the business. And so I think those two connections, yeah, those two connections are really, really highly important, I feel, and the market is always looking for those, but it wasn't easy in reality. And in order to connect those two worlds, one foundation that's needed really is to connect skills with jobs and skills with content, so that you know what skills are needed, where is everyone at the required skill strength for the job, for all the skills, and all skills are equally important for a job. Of course, other things come in as well, personality traits, but let's just talk about skills. And so through that connection, you know what skills you need to improve, for every employee based on the job. Okay, that's one thing, but that's not enough, because at the same time, okay, now you know what skills someone needs to improve. You need the right content to help that employee, at least theoretical on paper, to improve that. And with OJT and practical, it's just better, but you need that theoretical part as well. And that connection has historically been almost impossible. And so it's a very labor-intensive work to build all of those mappings and maintain those. And it's a fairly dynamic situation. So it's not enough if you do it once. You have to maintain this every month moving forward. And the larger the organization have 10,000 jobs. It's impossible to do that in a library of 20,000 courses. Now AI can build those connections and those mappings. And once this is done, then tailored and personalized training suggestion, career planning, exploring investigation, if there's an impact on, your business KPIs. This is where AI can make a big difference. Now, content comes next. But if you ask me what the top expectation is, at least, on our side of the things, what we believe, it's that connection.
Wow, great answer. Great answer. Fascinating. And I wish we could have scheduled more time, but we only have a short window here, and I've got about 15 more questions I wanted to ask you. So real quick, rapid fire. What do you think what do you think is the most important metric, or two or three, that your clients are measuring? Are they just worried about, checking the box on compliance, or are they actively tying it to that business performance that you were talking about? Like, any key metrics?
It heavily depends. Can you hear me, John? I hope the connection is still good.
Yes.
Good. Okay.
Yes.
So I think it heavily depends on the organization. We have a wide spectrum of different situations. We have organizations, and we come across organizations that are mostly check the box. That's all they care, and mitigate risk through compliance, and that's the top priority. And then we have all the way up to organizations that have a bold vision on really connecting learning with development and really correlating data with performance, business performance. So depending on what everyone's vision is and how ambitious they are in the L&D field, they're using the system in a different way.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, final question. What's your best advice for organizations that want to up their franchise learning plan? Any best practices that you want to share?
I think I would just refer to the previous question. I think it's very, very important, even in the franchise world, even in the micro world of a store that may be part of a huge ecosystem of an franchise organization. I feel that they have to really first define what success looks like, and then tie those metrics that define success back to what is the typical profile of an employee, what are the skills that need to be trained, and then tailor training next to it, so that it really serves that purpose. And there are many ways to do it. We came across at some point a customer, and it was so interesting. They had sort of the collective knowledge level, in a way, that was, imagine in a store you may have 20 employees. At some point, let's say that you have a curriculum that is the must. So everybody should at least have that minimum training. That is essential, that's important to run the store. And so if everyone has been fully well trained and everything complete on the job, then you have a certain collective knowledge level. Okay. Now with that high turnover, imagine 5 people going. So the next day, that knowledge drops by 25%. Okay. And that organization was measuring the impact of that drop in the business and all the metrics at the store. And they realized at a certain threshold where it has an impact on revenue and other things, customer service and so on. So for them, based on that, they wanted to make sure that they lift that level up to 100% as quick as possible, and they knew exactly what the performance should look like, so that the performance of the store would not suffer out of the low performance of those people. So yeah, I would say connect learning with business outcome, because that's why you train your people anyway.
Sage advice and a great story. Great story on that's one I haven't heard of before. The collective knowledge as a way to measure effectiveness, and at Talent to Learning, we just love measuring effectiveness in ways that are proof point positive to senior executives on the value of training and education in an organization, and that's a really unique one. Well, anyway, we're well over time. Lefteris, this was a fascinating conversation. Thanks for tuning in. And sharing your expertise, all kinds of things I hadn't considered today, even though I spend a lot of my time in this space. So it's exciting to see where you're pushing the solutions and what organizations are trying to do and how complex it is. I think at first blush, a lot of organizations think channel partner or franchise is easy stuff because it's just like employees, but it's not. I think it's the most difficult vertical in the learning sector, because it's like your most complex employee deployment times 10, because you have all these variations of it. And so it's that makes it a very difficult vertical to compete in. And so congratulations on your success there.
Thank you so much, Sean.
All right.
In reality, if you are able to successfully launch those type of organizations, in theory, you can launch, and serve any industry.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, well, great conversation. Look forward to getting an update next year on your progress. Listeners, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Talent to Learning Show. You can find more of our fiercely independent content at talenttolearning.com, and you can find more information on Schoox at schoox.com. All right, have a great day, everyone.